Alright, so let's talk about one of the biggest questions on everybody's mind right now. Is now actually a good time to purchase real estate? If you've been paying even half a brain to the news, you're aware that the market is weird. It's confusing. And in this video, we're gonna cut through the BS. We're gonna look at the 2025 real estate paradox, dig into the numbers, and by the time I'm done with it, you'll have a solid grip on whether buying now is the move for you. Stick with me, because this is the deep dive you've been looking for. So, there's actually a name for this that's happening right now. It's referred to as a gridlock, and that's the perfect term for it. You have on the one side prospective buyers who are waiting because, sincere or not, mortgage rates are high. And you've got homeowners and they're just not selling. Why would they give up a 3% mortgage rate for a new one in the sixes? So the answer to our big question isn't a simple yes or no. It's a big, fat, it depends. It depends entirely on your location, your financial situation, and your long-term plans. This gridlock is creating three main things: high mortgage rates, surprisingly stable home prices that just aren't crashing, and a real shortage of homes for sale. Let's jump right into the cost reality, because this segment hurts a little bit. Nationwide, the average monthly mortgage payment in today's time is 38% higher than the average rent. And in some of America's biggest cities, that gap swells to 57%. Take it in. In the short term, renting is much less expensive on a month-to-month basis. Affordability is tough. There's no getting around it. But, and this is a large but, we can't just look at the monthly payment. We have to look at the long game. The price of homes in the U.S. has gone up historically by about 3.4% a year since, you guessed it, 1891. That long-term wealth-building effect is the superpower of homeownership. And it's why this whole rent or buy math is so tricky. So where does the market stand right now? Let's look at three key points. First, rates. They are moderating, and everybody thinks they're going to remain in the mid-6% range for the rest of 2025. That golden vision of a perfect sub-5% rate is not in the cards at any time soon. That's led to a shift in strategy. What folks are now doing is marry the house, date the rate. That is, find the house that you love today and refinance later when rates do come down sometime. Second, supply. Inventory remains very tight, but it's rising, slowly. Why? Because life happens. Individuals find new jobs, families grow, they have to shrink. These things that happen in life are slowly starting to overwhelm that fear of losing a low rate. And third, prices. Not looking for a crash. JP Morgan is estimating about 3% price appreciation in 2025. Why? Because there is still a lack of homes. And it is downright prohibitively costly to build new ones. This is not an American tale only. Central banks around the world are tackling this. The U.S. Federal Reserve remains firm, but may make a few small rate cuts this year. Our economy continues to grow, but at a reduced rate. Now look around the globe. Their benchmark rate in the Eurozone is lower, at around 2.15%, but in countries where they are battling runaway inflation, like Brazil, Russia, and Turkey, rates are sky high. We're referring to 15%, 17%, even over 40%. And a really interesting turn is happening in Japan. They've had zero or worse, negative rates for years. Now, their central bank is finally raising them. The entire world economy is readjusting, and real estate is smack in the middle of it. So what does that mean for your next mortgage? The forecasts are pretty consistent. That 30-year fixed rate is going to stay in the mid-6% range all of 2025. The average now is about 6.49%. Now, lots of people are waiting for the rate to fall below 6%. But a study by Fannie Mae reports that's probably not going to happen until late 2026. That's a very long wait. And this is key. Even if the Fed lowers its own rates modestly, it's not necessarily going to cause mortgage rates to drop through the floor. They're tied to long-term bond markets. So the message is, don't look for a shock drop. That's fascinating. The type of mortgages people use creates entirely different market formations around the world. In America, we're obsessed with fixed-rate mortgages. We own roughly 80% of them. It's great for the owners because your payment is fixed and you're totally insulated if interest rates rise. But it's also what leads to this lock-in situation. Why would someone with a 3% fixed rate sell? It slows everything down. And now take Europe and the UK. They employ many more adjustable rate mortgages. There are somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 million in the UK on a variable rate. So when the central banks push rates up, the people who own their homes feel it in their pocketbook immediately. That can lead to them selling, which can cool prices that much sooner. Two systems, two very distinct consequences. Let's go in those golden handcuffs. It's a wonderful name. If you bought a house or refinanced between 2020 and 2022, you likely negotiated a mortgage rate of between 3% and 4%. You are bound to that wonderful deal by golden handcuffs. It's a wonderful problem to have, but a problem nonetheless for the market. It's estimated this impact alone kept some 1.7 million homes off the market between 2022 and 2024. That's a huge number of homes that simply never came onto the market. But we told you, life happens. In 2025, we're beginning to see the handcuffs loosen a little bit, not because rates are declining, but because people's lives are in flux. So what do we actually observe the supply to be? We must divide this up into two categories, existing and new. Existing homes, the supply isn't much improved. As of July 2025, we had about 4.6 months supply, an improvement over the crazy low of 1.6 months in 2022, but still below what we'd define as a normal, balanced market. Now, the new home market is a different picture. There are 7.4 months supply of new homes. Lots of room to breathe. And this is a great time because the builders need to sell. So why aren't the builders just unloading new cheap homes onto the market to fix this shortage? The reason is in a construction cost crisis. Altogether, it costs about 30% more to build a house now compared to 5 short years ago. Look at some of the materials. Engineered steel cost went up 66% in recent cycles. Oriented strand board, a core building material, saw prices rise over 500% at one point, and half a whole of the total cost of construction is labor. There's a chronic shortage of labor, and wages are going up. All that means that it just isn't worth it for builders to focus on the low-cost entry-level market. They're building more expensive houses, which keeps overall price pressure high. In order to truly understand affordability, we do something called the Housing Affordability Index, or HAI. It essentially says, can the family earning the median income afford the median-priced house? If the index is less than 100, the answer is no. There are 3 drivers of this index. Number 1, the high and still rising slowly median home price. That's a negative. Number 2, mortgage rates in the 6% bracket, which totally jack up the monthly payment. That's a very big negative. And number 3, median family income. Incomes are rising, but they're just rising slower than housing costs. So that's only a weak positive factor. Add it all up, and you can see why affordability is such a problem. We can get as simple a comparison of rent versus buy as possible. Today, in all 50 of America's largest metropolitan areas, it is cheaper to rent than to buy. Every one of them. But the size of that gap is all. The lowest cost markets, where the gap is narrowest, are in the Rust Belt, cities like Detroit, Cleveland, and Philadelphia. On the other hand, the spreads are the largest in the high-tech cities with the highest prices. In San Jose, California, for example, buying is a whopping 131% higher every month than renting. It's a strictly local story. One of the most valuable tools to use for your own research is the price-to-rent ratio. You calculate it using the median home price and dividing it by the median rent per year. Here's a quick checklist. If the ratio is 15 or below, buying tends to be the financially sounder option. Between 16 and 20, it's somewhat of a gray area, depending on your individual circumstances. But if the ratio is 21 or above, the figures simply indicate that renting is the financially wiser option. Nowadays, in most markets, we're seeing ratios creeping into the renting makes more sense quadrant, at least in the short term. But we have to go back to homeownership's superpower, equity building. This is what flips the script around long term. Equity is in two flavors. First, with every payment, you're reducing your loan balance. That's amortization. You're saving out of need. Second, your house will probably appreciate in value over time. As we've seen, that long-term average is 3.4% per year. This combination is a good inflation hedge as well as an excellent wealth-building strategy. It's why, even in months when the expense is significant, ownership can win out with sufficient time. So if you're thinking about taking the plunge, your finances must be in tip-top condition. Your single most important number right now is your debt-to-income ratio, or DTI. In a high-interest rate world, this is the magic number that informs you about how much house you can really afford. Let's take a look at the loans. For a conventional loan, you'll typically need a 620 FICO score and at least 3 to 5% down. An FHA loan will take you in with as little as a 580 score and just 3.5% down, but you'll be paying mortgage insurance typically until the end of the loan. With a 500 to 579 score, you could be required to put 10% down on an FHA loan. And then there are VA and USDA loans if you qualify, which can be zero down. Whether or not you use the property for what you're going to use it for makes a huge difference. Is it your primary residence, where you live, or is it an investment property? The regulations are much stricter on investment properties. You're paying bigger interest rates, and you'll typically need 20% down payment. The lenders consider them riskier. In order to qualify as your primary residence, you can qualify for those lower rates and low down payment programs we had been talking about. You have more options and support as a first-time homebuyer. So get very clear on your goal ahead of time. First-time buyers, listen up. Your mortgage payment isn't just principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. That's called PITI. You really do need to budget for maintenance. A rule of thumb is the 1% to 3% rule. You should save 1% to 3% of the value of your house every year for repairs and upkeep. So, for a $400,000 house, that's $4,000 to $12,000 per year that you should be setting aside. Older houses or houses in tough climates will be on the higher end of that range. And property taxes are in a huge scatter. The same $300,000 home could cost $6,700 in property taxes in New Jersey, but only $2,300 in Florida. You will need to research your specific location. So who really should be buying now? Let's break it out by profile. First-time buyer with limited savings? It's challenging, but possible. You'll need to employ those low down payment loans and target the lowest cost markets. You need to be laser-focused on your budget and your debt. Are you a long-term investor holding for 5+ years? Then definitely, this is a good time. The high monthly payment is offset by less competition and that long-run wealth building we talked about. Short-term thinking, less than 3 years, no way. It's too costly. The cost of buying and selling is so high that you won't even get your money's worth. The sensible thing to do is rent. And if you're a well-qualified move-up buyer with a lot of equity, it's up to you. If something in your life is forcing you into a different position and you must have another home, then it can be worth giving up your low rate for the house you really need. If you're today's buyer, you're going to need a game plan. Here are 3 key strategies. First, date the rate, buy the house. Don't wait for a rate miracle. With rates still set to creep higher, purchase a house you love today and refinance down the road when rates finally do come down in a year or two. Second, target new construction. Remember that you get more inventory with the builders. 66% of them are offering incentives like price concessions or closing cost help. That's negotiating power you just don't have with a normal homeowner. Third, optimize your debt-to-income ratio. With interest rates so high, making the monthly payment so expensive, you need to pay off other debts, credit cards, auto loans, aggressively before you even get to a lender. This is the best thing you can do to qualify for more home. So that's the bottom line. The current market, with its low volume of transactions and high prices, is actually weeding out the less serious, less financially sound buyers. For you, who are prepared, who have your finances in good shape and a long-term time frame, this offers a unique strategic opportunity. There is less competition. You might have more time to decide, and the long-term fundamentals for real estate as a wealth-building vehicle are still incredibly strong. The greatest challenge now isn't that real estate is a fantastic long-term investment. Trust me, it is. The challenge is getting beyond that short-term cash flow barrier. And if you can get beyond that, this might be your moment. If you like this video and wish to proceed with your real estate learning, then subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so that you can know what's in store next. To keep your momentum rolling, I've chosen another video for you that will help you in your investing journey. You'll see it right here on the screen. Just click it and go ahead and learn some more. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.